What if someone told you that in one of Muhammad Ali's most incendiary press conferences, a woman rose from the crowd and branded him a coward so fiercely that 200 journalists froze into silence? The room tightened, breath held. His handlers were already inching forward, ready to shut it down. Cameras whirred. The moment teetered on collapse. He could have walked away, left her exposed, embarrassed under the glare of the world's media, but he didn't. What followed wasn't retaliation. It was something rarer, something almost disarming, a quiet act of grace that transformed hostility into something deeply human, a moment that lingered, that softened a room hardened by judgment, that left grown professionals blinking back tears. This wasn't about handling a difficult question. It was something else entirely, a revelation, proof that courage doesn't always roar in a ring. Sometimes it listens. If this story resonates, reflect on a moment when compassion changed your view. Those moments matter more than we admit. April 28, 1967. The ballroom at the New York Hilton pulsed with tension, overcrowded, overheated, charged. More than 250 journalists packed shoulder to shoulder, cameras stacked, voices restless. At the center sat Muhammad Ali, 3 days removed from refusing induction into the U.S. military. At his peak, heavyweight champion, untouchable in the ring. But outside it, to many Americans, he was something else entirely. A defiant figure, a man labeled disloyal, condemned before he could even speak. The conference had been arranged to explain his stance on the Vietnam War, but clarity wasn't the room's currency. Judgment was. And in that crowd sat Sarah Mitchell, a seasoned reporter, sharp, respected, unflinching. But she wasn't there just to report. She carried grief. 6 months earlier, a telegram had rewritten her life. Her younger brother, James Mitchell, 22 years old, killed in Vietnam. Drafted, afraid, still he went. His letters came weekly, honest, fragile, brave. The last one arrived 2 days after the news of his death. Since then, grief had hardened into something sharper, anger, confusion, a quiet, simmering ache. And now she sat watching this man, this champion, refuse the very call her brother had answered. It felt unbearable.
Ali faced the room, calm but visibly worn. The questions came quickly and harshly. Why call yourself the greatest if you won't fight for your country? I'm fighting for my beliefs, he answered, steady. You're hiding behind religion. My faith is not a shield, it's my truth. The exchanges continued, tense, unyielding. But in the third row, something was building. And then she stood. The scrape of her chair cut through the room like a blade. "How dare you?" she said. The words landed heavy, personal, unfiltered. "My brother died in Vietnam. He was 22. He was scared, but he went because that's what you do." Silence followed, complete, absolute. Her voice trembled, but it didn't break. "You stand here, refusing, calling yourself great? You're not. My brother was brave. You're a coward." The words hung there, raw, unavoidable. Ali's team moved instantly, signaling to end it. But he raised a hand. No, let her speak. When she finished, the room remained still. No whispers, no movement. Ali stood, not defensive, not angry, measured. "Miss," he asked softly, "what was your brother's name?" The question disarmed her. "James," she said, "James Mitchell." Ali nodded, slow, intent. "Tell me about him. Not how he died, who he was." The room shifted, something subtle, but undeniable. She hesitated, then she spoke. About his laugh, his terrible jokes, his love for baseball, for music, his dream of teaching. The anger loosened just slightly. Ali listened fully. When she finished, he spoke again. "Your brother sounds like a remarkable young man. I'm sorry for your loss." No performance, no deflection, just sincerity. "You called me a coward. I understand why." He paused. "Your brother showed courage by going to war. I'm showing courage by refusing it. Different paths, same conviction." He stepped closer. "You're not just angry at me, you're angry at what took him from you." The words landed differently, not as a rebuttal, as recognition.
Her composure cracked. The anger dissolved into something more honest. "I miss him," she whispered. Ali nodded. "So do I, in a way." He spoke gently, carefully. "Your brother believed in something bigger than himself. So do I. Two men, two choices, both rooted in belief." And then something no one expected. She stepped forward and embraced him. Tears, unrestrained, real. And he held her, quietly, without hesitation. No cameras needed, but they captured it anyway. The image traveled everywhere, not as controversy, as humanity. When she pulled away, her voice was softer. "I was wrong." Ali smiled, slight, kind. "No, you were grieving." He turned to the room. "What you saw today, that's courage. Not loud, not combative, but open, willing to understand." Her article, published days later, didn't condemn him. It revealed him. "I went to expose a coward," she wrote. "Instead, I found courage I didn't expect. Not in fists, but in restraint, in listening, in compassion." Years passed. They stayed in touch. She covered his fights, his return, his decline. And when Muhammad Ali passed in 2016, she spoke of that day. "He could have destroyed me," she said. "He chose to understand me." Because sometimes strength isn't about winning. It's about seeing the pain behind the anger and answering it with grace. And that was the moment everything shifted. Not just in that room, but far beyond it. Because what unfolded inside that crowded ballroom didn't stay there. It rippled outward, through headlines, through living rooms, through conversations at dinner tables where people were already divided, already exhausted. The image of Muhammad Ali embracing a grieving reporter didn't look like defiance. It looked like understanding. In the days that followed, Sarah Mitchell sat at her desk, staring at a blank page. This wasn't the article she had planned. She had come prepared to dismantle him, to expose him, to write something sharp, decisive, unforgiving. But the words wouldn't come the way they used to, because something inside her had changed. When she finally began writing, it wasn't with anger, it was with honesty. "I went there to prove he was a coward," she wrote, "but I left questioning everything I thought I knew about courage." She didn't erase her grief. She didn't deny her brother's sacrifice. Instead, she expanded the definition of bravery. Not just the kind that marches into war, but the kind that stands alone and refuses it. The article spread quickly, reprinted, discussed, debated. Some praised her, others criticized her, but no one ignored it, because it didn't simplify anything. It complicated things in the best way. For many families who had lost sons, brothers, fathers in Vietnam, her words struck something deep. They didn't suddenly agree with Muhammad Ali. but they began to see him differently. Not as a villain, not as a coward, but as a man making a choice that carried its own kind of risk. And Ali? He never used that moment to elevate himself. He didn't replay it, didn't boast about it, because for him it wasn't a victory. It was simply the right response. Years later, when the noise around that era began to settle, that single moment remained, clear, undistorted. Not the arguments, not the accusations, but the pause, the question, "What was your brother's name?" It became a quiet lesson, one that didn't need a stage, that sometimes the strongest move is not to strike back, but to lean in, to listen, to recognize that anger often carries something heavier underneath. Sarah would later say that day didn't just change her opinion. It changed how she saw people, how she wrote, how she listened. She became sharper in her reporting, but softer in her judgment. And that balance made her voice stronger than ever. Because what she experienced wasn't defeat, it was clarity. And maybe that's the part most people miss, that real courage isn't always loud. It doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it asks a simple question. Sometimes it chooses restraint when retaliation would be easier. Sometimes it turns confrontation into connection. Muhammad Ali understood that, not just in the ring, but in moments like this. Moments where no titles were on the line, but everything else was. And long after the headlines faded, that moment still speaks, quietly but powerfully. Because in a room full of noise, grace was the only thing anyone remembered. And in the end, that's what endured. Not the accusations, not the headlines, not even the controversy that once consumed the nation, but a single, unexpected moment of humanity. Years would pass, history would shift, opinions would evolve, and Muhammad Ali, once criticized, once doubted, would come to be seen in a different light, not just as a champion of boxing, but as a man who understood something deeper. Because greatness isn't only measured in victories, not in titles, not in applause, but in how someone responds when tested in ways that have nothing to do with sport. That day, he could have fought back, with words, with pride, with ego. It would have been easy, expected even, but instead he chose something rare. He chose patience. He chose empathy. He chose to see a grieving sister instead of an angry voice. And that choice, it didn't just change a conversation. It changed a person. It changed a perspective. It quietly reshaped how people understood courage itself. Because real courage isn't always about standing your ground. Sometimes it's about softening it. Sometimes it's about holding space for someone else's pain, even when it's directed at you. Sarah came looking for a confrontation. She left with something else entirely, understanding, and maybe a little peace. And Ali, he didn't just defend his beliefs that day, he elevated them, without raising his voice, without tearing anyone down. That's the legacy that lingers. Not just the fights, not just the fame, but the moments where strength looked like compassion. Because in a world that often rewards the loudest response, he proved something quieter, something lasting, that the greatest victories aren't always won in the ring. Sometimes they're won in the heart.